Hi everyone, my name's Gabby, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys about plants and animals, one of my favorite subjects. So I'm currently a graduate student here at Michigan State University. That means I've graduated college and I'm continuing my training as a scientist here by still being in school and doing a lot of research. And so today we're going to be learning all about how animals look, why they act the way they do, and what they need to do to survive. So a little bit more about me. As I said, I'm a scientist and I like to study fisheries. So that means if you've ever had fish and chips or any kind of other seafood, I study those fisheries and how we can help make them even better. Some of the cool animals I've been able to work with so far are sea turtles, like this guy over here. I've worked on a project where I labeled a bunch of crabs and watched their behavior. And I've even worked on a project where I helped raise fish like Nemo and Dory. If you guys have seen Finding Nemo, all of those fish are actually part of a fishery, and so I've worked on them. Right now, I'm here at Michigan State, not studying anything in the ocean because we don't have an ocean here, but we do have some Great Lakes, which are these huge, huge lakes that look a lot like an ocean when you're standing at the shore. And so I studied the fish that live in Lake Huron, which is one of the Great Lakes. Now, let's talk about the animals. My first question to you guys is, what are the 3 things animals need to survive? I want you to think about if you have a pet at home, maybe a cat. I have 2 cats, or maybe a dog. What are the things you do for them every day that without it, they wouldn't be able to survive? That's right. The first thing that came to your mind was probably food. In the morning and at night, you probably pour some food into your dog or cat's bowl, and they happily go and eat it. So just like you and me, all animals need food. And some animals, they can eat plants, and some animals, they need to eat meat, and some animals can eat both. And so depending on what the diet of that specific animal, it'll depend on, how they get their food. All right, and the second thing they need is water. Again, I'm sure your parents have told you, oh, make sure to drink water on a hot day. The same goes for all animals. They need water too because it helps a lot of processes within their body work. Without it, they'd be dehydrated and really sick. And the last thing they need is some kind of shelter. And this can mean, maybe they dig a den in the snow. Maybe they go find a cave to hide in. Maybe they climb up a tree. But, they need somewhere where they can run away from predators. They can get a good night's rest. Maybe even where they store food. And so these 3 things are really, really what helps animals survive in the natural world. Now let's talk about plants. So first I want you guys to think about some of the main differences between plants and animals. Most animals, they can move around pretty quickly, right? They can kind of explore their territory, but plants, they're stuck in one place, right? And a lot of plants don't change with the different seasons. They have to, endure all of these hard winters or really hot summers. They don't get to move around and escape the weather. So knowing this, what do you think plants need to survive? Well, they don't, have to go out and hunt for their food. They actually make their own food through a process called photosynthesis. So that means that they take sunlight, any light, and they use that to power this photosynthesis process, where eventually they generate sugar, which they eat, and they also release oxygen into the air. But what are the 2 other components that we need for photosynthesis? Well, one of them is water. If you ever have to go water your house plants, that maybe this makes sense. You need water, and you also need this thing called carbon dioxide. And I'm sure you guys haven't heard of this. It's a molecule that lives in the air, and you can't see it, but every day we breathe it in and out. So the water and the carbon dioxide come together on the plant's surface, and then the sunlight hits it and it starts a reaction. And this reaction means that they can make food that they can eat and they can grow. And so without this water, carbon dioxide, and sunlight, plants will not do so well. So, if you ever have a plant inside your house that maybe you don't water enough, maybe it's in the shade, and the leaves start to look brown and kind of wilty and icky, well, that's because they're not getting everything they need to survive. All right, so now we're going to talk about a specific habitat. And a habitat is somewhere where plants and animals live. It's the environment around them. And so I want to talk about the forest because we have lots of those here in Michigan. There's lots of them in New England and really all across the US. And so if you think about a forest, I want you to think about what it looks like in the winter, right? So maybe it'll look like this middle picture here, where there's all that snow and you have these big trees, maybe you have little trees too. There's some wide open spaces and then maybe there's a lot of trees or shrubs. And in that forest is a bunch of animals. And so here we have a wolf and over here we have a rabbit or a bunny. And so there's some tough things about living in the forest. One, there's snow, right? Snow is cold and wet. And how would you like it if you couldn't change your clothes after you went sledding and you were all wet and cold and you didn't have anywhere to go indoors and enjoy your hot cocoa, right? It'd be kind of tough to live like that. So luckily, both the wolf and the rabbit have developed these really thick, fluffy coats that actually kind of keep the water out, keep their heat in. And so that's one way that they keep warm. Bunnies can also dig underground, and so when they dig in these little holes underground, the heat gets trapped from their body, and so it stays with them, so the cold air doesn't get in. And so there's another thing going on here between the wolf and the bunny. So if you guys have watched any nature show so far, you know there's a predator, the one who eats another animal, and then there's the prey, the one that gets eaten. This is just something that happens in nature, and actually you need a healthy prey and predator population in order for the whole system to work. So you'll see scientists have studied that, you know, when there's a lot of wolves, there's actually a lot of bunnies. Then the population will go down again and it'll come back up, but they always come back, go down and up together. And so without the wolves, the bunnies there'd be too many and they wouldn't all have enough food to eat. So their population wouldn't be doing very good. And then if the wolves didn't have the bunnies, they would have no food. So because of these limited resources, right, they don't have enough grass or enough space without the other, then they have to coexist together. And they both have adaptations, which are basically how they have changed over time in order to like live in their environment better, that make it a lot easier for them to live in this forest habitat where a lot of other animals can't. So talking about predator and prey, we're going to watch this fun little video where the iguana is the prey and the snakes are the predators. I'm personally team iguana. I'm going to be rooting for the iguana to escape, but as we know in nature, they don't always escape, so let's see what happens. Those are the snakes, the predators. And there's our little iguana. He's gonna try to pass all of the snakes to go to the other side where his food is, which is in the water.
A snake's eyes aren't very good, but they can detect movement. So if the hatchling keeps its nerve, it may just avoid detection.
Oh! Now all the snakes know there's a prey around and they're all gonna chase him. He has to escape. You can see how the lizard and the snakes are built differently, but they live in the same environment. Uh-oh. If he gets over these rocks to the water, then he's in the pool and he can go access his food. Look at that, he made it over. You know, so that's an example of a predator-prey relationship. Sometimes the snakes will win, sometimes the iguanas will win, but it's important they both win at different times to keep the whole system working right. So remember, we just talked about the forest, and so now let's talk about the desert and what challenges are in the desert for plants and animals to live in. So if you've ever been to the desert, maybe you've been out to California, Arizona, Utah, you know, it looks really different than where you live, where there's trees and a lot of green grass, right? I don't see much green in these pictures. So it's very sandy, very dry. There's a lot of sun. That means it's really hot. And so, you know, if you were that bunny from the forest with that thick winter coat, you would not be doing very well in the desert because you'd overheat. You know, and there is not much rain in the desert. So that means access to water is really hard. So there's a few adaptations that I want to focus on that mainly plants have developed in the desert. So hopefully you guys have heard of cacti, plural. And so right here, we're looking at a saguaro cactus. This is the biggest of all the cacti. And it lives in the Sonoran Desert, which is in Arizona and also in the northern region of Mexico. And so this guy is really cool. He has a lot of really interesting tactics in order to, one, not overheat, you know, not get bleached from the sun, and also to retain water. So how do you guys think plants in general get their water? Right, there's two main ways. One is through absorbing it like on the leaves, and the second is absorbing it in the roots. So the root system goes out underneath into the soil. And so for a cacti, instead of the roots going straight down, they actually are only a couple inches under the ground, and they go out for feet and feet, so all the way around this cactus. So that means that whenever it does rain, they have a greater chance of absorbing the most amount of rain because they have these roots spread out everywhere, right? And then I don't know if you can see very well in this picture, but there's all these little folds, right? And inside the cactus, in those folds, water is stored. And because there's all these folds, it creates more room for more water to be stored. Sorry. And then the cactus, you see it's green. And so wherever it's green, that means photosynthesis can happen, which remember is how they make their own food. And so that's what allows this guy to do so well in the desert. The biggest saguaro cactus was 80 feet tall. The average one is between 40 and 50 feet. But it can take 10 years just to grow 2 inches. This tall. And you're talking about saguaros that are 80 feet tall. And so that means these types of plants live a really, really long time. Just like you've heard of trees living for hundreds of years, the same can be said for the saguaro cactus. So it's a really important part of this landscape and actually can provide home for others, food for others. And so next we're going to watch a little bit of a video that will introduce you to some different animals and plants that also live in the desert, have to cope with this really hot, really sunny, really dry place. A day in the desert. So that's a saguaro right there, and you can see actually that these are flowers, and so this bird is coming and eating some of the flowers to give it nutrition. And so then there's also all these different types of birds that will peck into the saguaro cactus and kind of make their nest inside there, which gives them shelter from the heat. That's a hummingbird. That's a Gila monster. They're very poisonous. And see, certain times of the year, cacti get these flowers on them that will feed others. Here's another nest. That's a hawk. It's a prickly pear. I don't know if you guys have heard about fruit. So cats often lie on the rocks in the shaded area because they stay really cool. It's kind of like air conditioning for them. So it's already 103 degrees and it's not even midday yet in the desert. 107 degrees. So it's super, super hot and it takes a long time to cool down. That's a coyote. And now the sun's gonna set, but you can see how important the saguaro was to that landscape, right? And how all the different animals had to do different things to stay cool, hydrated, and have food. So now that we've been talking about these habitats, what happens when humans come in and they build a road in the middle, right? Put a mall, or even, you know, a bunch of houses? What happens to the animals and plants that used to live there? And unfortunately, the answer a lot of times is that, you know, they can't make their migrations they used to make. They can't go from point A to point B like they used to. That might mean that they can't find a mate, or that they can't find food or water or shelter. And so it can have really, really bad impacts on these animals. So now we're going to watch a little video that talks about how scientists are coming up with solutions to helping humans and animals live together a little bit better. So they built a bridge for animals right where over the road. So this means that the animals can still cross over to the different territories like they used to. And look, little penguins can cross the road to this tunnel that goes underneath the road. And this helps the populations do a lot better, and it's a lot less roadkill. That's always sad. Here in Australia, there is a bridge for crabs that they crawl up and over the other side, so they don't have to cross the road. And in Kenya, there's a tunnel for elephants that goes underneath the road, similar like to the deer one that went over the road. That's just some of the examples of how, you know, humans can actually work to help the animals cross into their different territories, even if we've built structures that could make that a challenge for them. So I just wanted to finish this talk by reminding you guys that what we talked about today was that animals need three things: food, water, and shelter. And they also have special adaptations for each different habitat that they have. And then plants make their own food, but they still need water, and they need sunlight, and they need carbon dioxide in order to make their own food. And so over here, you know, I just want to show you guys how different all these different types of plants and animals can be. Oops. All these different plants and animals can be, right? And so there's just so much to discover still, and scientists play a really important role in not only understanding animals and plants, but like how humans can help them, how we can live and coexist with them better, so that we all have the resources we need to survive. And I just want to remind you guys that it's never too late or too early to get interested in science. Always keep exploring the outdoors around you, asking questions. And remember to just have fun when you're outside and take joy in nature. So I hope this talk was enjoyable and fun for you all. I certainly had a fun time giving it. And I will see you guys another time.